Hi, I'm Dhipthi Dona. I'm presently pursuing my master's in education. I want to share about three significant moments in my life that have shaped my choices, my understanding of self, and the hopes I have for the future. The first was when I bumped into a video by the UN Human Rights Commission when I was 11 years old. It presented to my naive, privileged childhood that discrimination, oppression, and poverty were very real. Until then, I very sincerely believed that everyone was indeed happy, safe, and sound. When you are brought up in a very pampered religious Catholic family, to some extent you begin to believe that everyone is safe and sound because, after all, loving and caring for each other are propagated as the only possible norms. You hear these values again and again at the church, at catechism class, at the moral science class in school. And you really can't think of a world beyond any of these themes. I drew my identity from these Christian ideals of unconditional love, empathy, and kindness. I grew up to become a teenager who took these values very seriously. In fact, at school, I was that kid who always followed the rules. I always obeyed the teachers and all the elders because I very strongly believed that elders always knew better. Therefore, my understanding of the larger world was that we had essential structures that protect us. We had rules and nurturing religious texts to follow. I believe that if we adhere to them, then everybody would be safe and happy. The 10-minute video by the UN Human Rights Commission changed all of these beliefs that I had. It was titled What Are Human Rights? I remember watching the video several times on loop to a point where I knew it by heart. The part of the video, which was essentially life changing for the 11-year-old me, were the following set of questions it features. I quote: if people have the right to food and shelter, why are over 16,000 children dying of starvation every day, which is one every 5 seconds? If people have the freedom of speech, why are thousands in prison for speaking their minds? If people have the right to education, why are over a billion adults unable to read? Unquote. These questions were my reality check. The 10 minutes video introduced me to the fact that the world wasn't as black and white as I had presumed it to be. It wasn't as simple as Jesus wanted us to love each other, so everybody would do so, and ideally, everybody would have their rights and be happy. In some sense, the video made me take note of the real world politics out there. I therefore concluded that there are people who fight for rights that are by default available to others. These realities and observations were definitely my introduction to understanding my own privilege and ideas around activism. Greatly inspired by the UN and the Human Rights Charter, I started attending the school level Model United Nations. While preparing for which, I started reading about the Syrian war, the genocide of Elam Tamils, right in the backyard of my state, Tamil Nadu. I just couldn't understand how everyone was going about their lives like everything was absolutely normal, and how all the wars, genocides, were merely content for the MUNs we were attending wearing fancy clothes. I felt extremely guilty that miles away, a child's house was being bombed, and I'm here speaking about it as if it were contents of a novel, while I was attending school, celebrating birthdays, and going out on family vacations. In some sense, I couldn't wrap my head around how, just by the virtue of being born into a specific class, caste, religion, region, Markers that we had absolutely no say over. A whole generation of children my age were being bombed or being denied the access to basic living standards and security, things I wasn't even fighting for to have. When I vocalized these thoughts, I was asked to be grateful. But how does one feel grateful and not guilty? How do you feel blessed to have things that other people don't? How can you be thankful for living in an unfair and unjust society? Basic human rights aren't supposed to be luxuries, right? These were the realizations that marked my introduction to understanding structures of power. At 13, I felt let down by a charter and a commission that I ardently believed in. Irrespective of how many times that video told me that human rights are not a history lesson, they are not words on a page, they are not speeches or commercials for PR campaigns. The way the world leaders and managers worked, the way UN selectively called out violence, made it look like it was indeed all of those things it was claiming not to be. It was the shattering of the make believe peaceful world that I was institutionalized to believe in growing up. The next significant moment in my life was when I stumbled upon feminism while surfing on the UN Human Rights Commission website. I first started reading about feminism as a 14-year-old. I was shocked by the existence of the gender wage gap, the glass ceilings, the casting couch. Despite the fact that my parents never let my sister and I go out unmonitored, it was shocking because I had always thought of gender discrimination as a thing of my grandmother's times, and more so as an individual problem rather than a systemic one. On my 15th birthday, a national tragedy happened that shaped my feminist orientation, which was the Delhi gang rape of Nirbhaya. Ever since, I always associated my birthday with that cruel, inhuman incident. In 2015, I caught a glimpse of BBC's India's Daughter, a documentary on the case in which the rapist was saying that he raped the girl because he wanted to teach her a lesson. Very sincerely, he believed that he did it for her good and she should have been quiet and learned that lesson. That sentence made me question how every adult in my family, church, all the adults I knew used to talk about capital punishment being the solution to reduce violence against women. But how do you discipline a person into not raping a woman when he fundamentally believes that it is his responsibility to teach her a lesson? In his eyes, she is technically a being with no autonomy or any rights of her own. For him, it was an act based on his values that, in fact, many in our society support overtly or silently. That was the point I knew I was seeking to understand structures that the elders in my immediate reality did not have answers to. They were, in fact, worried and concerned that I was asking these questions, and to some extent asked me to shut up and obey because, as it goes, elders always know better. The adults with their pretensions were, in fact, part of the problem and not the solution. I began understanding that every time our teachers were telling us that our dupatta wasn't wide enough or our kurtis weren't long enough, they were essentially policing our bodies so that we do not attract the male gaze. They were indeed saying that they cared more about the boys not getting distracted than about the education or rights of the girls. This understanding of how a woman's body is made a landscape of male gaze, opinions, and how they further hold the woman accountable by shaming her when she ever so slightly deviates from these norms of the society led to my broader understanding of systemic underpinnings of the patriarchal society. At 15, I became hypervigilant, skeptical, and almost suspicious of any structure of power. My bachelor's degree in literature helped me to proactively engage with such systemic issues. The syllabus was such that we consciously looked at literatures of the world. We had papers like Arabian and Caribbean literature, West Asian literature, Native American writings, which showed us that literature and, in extension, culture is so much more than the Eurocentric ideas of the white man.